Check the names to avoid, then let me write this story. My aunt wired me $40,000 last year. She said it clearly, out loud, at my cousin's engagement party, in front of everyone holding champagne flutes and tiny crab cakes. I've been sending you $500 every month for 6 years, sweetheart, for your independence fund. I smiled. I nodded. My hands went cold around my glass. I had never seen a single dollar of it. Let me back up, because this story doesn't make sense without context. My name is Adrian. I'm 29. I'm a licensed practical nurse, which means I work 12-hour shifts on a cardiac floor. My feet hurt every single day, and when I tell people what I do for a living, they say, "Oh, that's so noble," and then immediately ask why I didn't become a doctor. I live in a studio apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I drive a 2014 Honda Civic with 114,000 miles on it. I eat rice and beans 3 nights a week, not because I like them, but because protein and carbs and $5 total. None of that was a choice I made out of laziness. I worked hard. I saved what I could. I picked up extra shifts when the hospital needed coverage, and I never called in, and I never complained to my supervisor even when patients were cruel to me and the charge nurse pretended not to notice. I told myself that was just what starting out looked like, that it gets easier, that I was building something. What I didn't know, what I had no idea about, was that someone else had been trying to help me build it. My Aunt Sylvia is my father's older sister. She never had children of her own. She married once, briefly, in her early 30s, and then she didn't, and she seemed perfectly fine with that. She's the kind of woman who sends birthday cards that arrive exactly on your birthday, not 2 days late, not a week early. She remembers things. She calls on the anniversary of your cat dying. She is relentlessly, exhaustingly present in a way that the rest of my family absolutely is not. When I was 17, she pulled me aside at Thanksgiving and asked me what I actually wanted to do with my life. Not what my parents wanted, not what looked good on a college application, what I wanted. I told her I wanted to take care of people. I'd always been that kid, the one who noticed when someone was off, who stayed late, who didn't look away when things got hard. She nodded like I'd said something serious. She said, "That's a real answer. I'll remember that." I thought it was just something adults say. It wasn't. 6 years ago, I was 23, and I had just passed my nursing boards. I was living at home to save money while I did my first year of work. My parents' house is in the suburbs of Cincinnati. Nice neighborhood, nice house, the kind with a finished basement and a hot tub that nobody uses. My parents both work. My father manages a regional distribution center. My mother does accounting for a dental group. They are comfortable. They have always been comfortable. In the particular way that means they never had to think very hard about money, but also never thought very hard about where it came from. I have one sibling, my brother Kevin. He's 3 years older than me. He is, to be perfectly direct about it, the favorite, not in a subtle way, in a loud, announced, celebrated way. Kevin got a car for his 16th birthday. I got a card and $30. Kevin got his college paid for. I took out loans. Kevin moved back home at 26 after a startup he joined collapsed, and my parents turned the basement into what my mother called his creative space and what I called his rent-free apartment with a bar cart and a gaming setup. Kevin is not a bad person. I want to say that clearly. He didn't create the system. He just lived inside it without ever questioning it, which is its own kind of problem. But I've made my peace with that. Mostly. What I have not made peace with is what I found out at that engagement party. My cousin Delia got engaged to a man named Rhett in February. They had the party at Delia's mother's house. That's my mother's side, separate family entirely, no connection to Aunt Sylvia. It was one of those parties that starts at 3 in the afternoon and goes until everyone pretends they have somewhere to be. There were flower arrangements on every surface. There was a cheese board the size of a coffee table. There was a slideshow of Delia and Rhett on a beach somewhere that cycled on a laptop propped against a vase. Aunt Sylvia drove up from Cincinnati. She doesn't do family events very often. My mother's side of the family and she have always had a polite distance between them, but she loves Delia and she made the trip. I saw her when I walked in and she came straight to me and hugged me and then held me at arm's length and looked at my face the way she always does, like she's taking inventory. "You look tired," she said. "I worked a double on Thursday," I said. She frowned. Not at me, at something behind her eyes. "Still the same apartment?" "Still the same apartment." She was quiet for a second. Then she said, I've been sending you money every month for 6 years, sweetheart. Your independence fund. $500 a month. I told your mother to make sure you had the account information after you passed your boards. The room didn't change. The music was still playing. Delia was laughing at something across the room. Someone dropped a fork. I said, what? She said, $500 a month. 6 years. I set up the automatic transfer. Your mother confirmed it went through every time. I did the math. That's $36,000. More than that, she told me she'd increased it to $650 the last 2 years. $36,000, no. Closer to $40,000, give or take. I had never seen any of it. My hands went cold. I said, Sylvia, I don't have an account you send money to. She looked at me, just looked at me for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, get your phone. We went to the hallway. It's a long one, off the kitchen, past where the coats get piled on a bench. We stood there and she pulled up her banking app and showed me. 6 years of transfers, same amount, same date every month, like clockwork. She is that kind of person. The transfers all said the same thing in the memo line for Adrian's future. The account they went to had a routing number I didn't recognize. I checked every account I had. Checking. Savings. The little secondary savings I'd opened at a credit union when I was 25 because I was trying to save for a car repair fund. None of them matched. The money had been going somewhere. Just not to me. I felt something very specific in that moment. Not anger? Not yet. It was more like when you step off a curb you didn't see coming. That split second of free fall before the sidewalk arrives. My brain was still trying to calculate the drop. Sylvia put her phone in her pocket. She was very still. She said, I need you to not react right now. Not here. I said, okay. I don't know how I said okay. I said it. She said, I'll call you tomorrow. Don't say anything to your parents tonight. I walked back into the party. I got a glass of water. I stood next to the cheese board for approximately 45 minutes and ate enough manchego to constitute a meal. And I smiled at everyone who spoke to me, and I did not say a single word that wasn't required. The drive home took 2 hours. I cried for the first 40 minutes, and then I stopped because I ran out of the kind of tears that come from shock, and the second kind, the hot, furious ones, hadn't arrived yet. I thought about every year. Every single year I'd been working and saving and stretching and telling myself I just needed to get through the next few months, the next rough patch, the next time my car needed something I hadn't budgeted for. I thought about the year I couldn't afford to fly home for Christmas and told everyone it was because of my schedule, which was half true. But the other half was the $240 flight I kept refreshing and couldn't justify. I thought about the birthday I spent alone in my apartment eating cereal because I couldn't afford to go out and didn't want to explain that to anyone. $40,000. $40,000 that someone who loved me had sent faithfully every single month because she believed in my future. Someone had been redirecting it. Someone had been redirecting it. Someone had set up an account or had access to an account and had been receiving that money for 6 years and had not said a word. My mother had confirmed the transfers. Sylvia said so. My mother knew. Sylvia called at 9 the next morning. She had not slept. I could tell from her voice. She had spent the night doing what she always does. She'd gathered information before she called me. She'd called her bank. She talked to someone in the fraud department. She had, and this is classic Sylvia, written down everything in a notebook. She told me the account receiving the transfers was opened in my name 6 years ago, my social security number, my name, my date of birth, but with a different address, my parents' address, and a phone number I didn't recognize. Someone in my family had opened a bank account in my name without my knowledge and had been receiving money sent to me for 6 years. That's not a mistake. That's not an accounting error. That's identity fraud. That's theft. I sat on my kitchen floor. I don't remember sitting down. I was just suddenly on the floor, back against the cabinet under the sink, phone against my ear. Sylvia said, I know what you're feeling right now. I said, I don't think you do. She was quiet. Then she said, you're right. I'm sorry. That was the thing about Sylvia. She never tried to paper over things with comfort that wasn't earned. She said, I have an appointment with my attorney on Wednesday. I'd like you to come. I took a personal day on Wednesday. I'd never taken a personal day for anything other than a medical appointment. I felt faintly guilty about it. Then, I thought about $40,000, and I felt less guilty. The attorney's name was Mr. Halverson. He was a compact man in his 60s with reading glasses he kept putting on and taking off. He asked questions the way doctors ask questions. Methodical, no reaction, just collecting information. He looked at Sylvia's transfer records. He looked at the account information her bank had sent her. He looked at me and asked if I'd ever signed anything, opened any account, given anyone my information to open an account for me. No, no, and no. He put his glasses on. He said, "This is bank fraud, identity fraud. If funds were redirected from a transfer intended for you, that's also theft. Depending on how the account was managed, there could be additional charges." He said the word charges very neutrally, like it was just a word. I said, "How do we find out who opened the account?" He said they were already working on that. Sylvia had authorized a subpoena through her bank's legal department. The records would take a week or two, but they'd have a name. We already knew, both of us. We just needed the paper to say it. 3 weeks later, it said it. The account had been opened by my mother. I'm going to take a breath here, because even now, writing this down, there's a specific feeling that comes with those words. It's not the grief part. I'd done a lot of that already. It was the confirmation of the thing you already knew, but had to let yourself not know for a little while, because the knowing was too heavy to carry without preparation. My mother, who called me every Sunday, who asked about my patients, who said, "We're so proud of you," at my nursing school graduation while my father took photographs. My mother had opened a bank account in my name, intercepted 6 years of transfers from Sylvia, and said nothing. To me, to Sylvia, to anyone. And my father. I didn't know yet how much my father knew. That was its own question. Mr. Halverson had some thoughts about next steps. The situation was clear enough legally. What was less clear was how I wanted to handle it. That was the word he used, handle. Carefully neutral. I said I wanted to think. Sylvia drove me home. We didn't talk for most of the drive. At one point she said, "I should have been sending it directly to you. I trusted them to pass it along." She said it like a confession. I said, "You were trying to involve them, make them feel included." She said, "Yes." I said, "That was a reasonable thing to think." She didn't say anything to that. Here's what I came to over the next 2 weeks. I couldn't just let it go, not because I was looking for revenge. And I want to be very careful here because I think a lot of people expect that from this kind of story, the satisfying heel turn, the comeuppance scene. That's not actually what drove me. What drove me was simpler and less cinematic. I needed the money back. I was 29 years old, and I was living on the edge of what I could sustain. And $40,000 of my money had been taken from me, and I needed it back. The other thing is that Sylvia had sent that money. 6 years of $500, then $650. She'd done that for me, reliably, because she believed in my future. Someone had used her generosity to fund something else entirely. And I had spent 6 years not knowing she was trying, and not understanding why I felt like I was treading water when I was doing everything right. She deserved for it to be made right, too. I called Mr. Halverson. I told him I wanted to move forward. He filed a civil complaint for financial fraud and identity theft. At the same time, Sylvia's bank filed a report with the appropriate regulatory bodies. When someone redirects bank transfers through a fraudulently opened account, it's not just a personal matter. It's a crime that banks take seriously. My mother did not know this was coming. I know that because I behaved normally for the entire month it took to set things in motion. I called on Sundays. I talked about my patients. I said, "I'm doing okay, just tired. You know how it is." I was not okay. I was very not okay. But I am good at compartmentalization in the way that people who've been through nursing school are good at it. You put the thing in a box, you put the box on a shelf, you do what needs to be done. The conversation happened on a Tuesday. My parents called together. They do that sometimes. My mother initiates, and then my father picks up the extension, which is a dynamic that has always been particular to them. They said they'd received some paperwork from an attorney, and they didn't understand what it was. I said, "I think you do." Silence. My father said, "Adrian." I said, "How much did you know?" My mother said nothing. My father said, and this is something I have thought about many times since. He said, "We thought Sylvia was being irresponsible, sending that much money with no oversight." I said, "She was sending it to me." My mother found her voice. She said, "You were young, you would have spent it." I let that sentence sit in the air for a moment. I let it breathe. I said, "On what?" She said, "On what?" She said, "We don't know." Things. You were impulsive. I said, "I've never in my adult life made an impulsive financial decision. I eat rice and beans 3 nights a week. I have not had a vacation in 4 years. I drive a car with 114,000 miles on it because I cannot afford to replace it. What did you think I was going to spend $40,000 on?" My father said, "It's not that simple." I said, "Where is the money?" Long pause. My mother said, "Kevin needed some support." There it was. Kevin's startup. Kevin's move back home. Kevin's creative space. Kevin's subsequent venture. A second business, which I'd heard about only vaguely, which apparently had also needed support. Kevin, who had never once struggled the way I had struggled, because apparently every time a gap appeared, something had been there to fill it. My money. Sylvia's gift to me. Filling gaps for Kevin. I didn't yell. I had expected to yell at some point in this conversation. I didn't. I felt something go very quiet in me, the way a room goes quiet when something important is about to happen. I said, "I'll let the attorneys sort out the rest." My mother said, "Adrian, we are your parents. We are your family. You would really do this to us." I said, "You did it to me first." I hung up. Kevin called that evening. This surprised me. Kevin and I have a relationship that exists mostly in group texts and the holidays. Not hostile, just not close. I hadn't expected him to be the one to call. He said, "I didn't know where the money was coming from. I want you to know that." I said, "How could you not ask?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't know. I just didn't." That was the truest thing he could have said. He didn't ask because he didn't have to ask. That was the whole architecture of our family. Kevin didn't need to understand where support came from because support just appeared, and he was raised to accept it as his due. He wasn't malicious. He was just thoroughly, completely conditioned. I said, "I'm not suing you, Kevin, for what it's worth." He said, "I would pay it back if I could." I said, "I know. I don't actually know if that's true, but it felt like the right thing to say. And sometimes in conversations with family, the right thing and the true thing are not the same thing, and you have to just pick one." The legal process was not fast. I want to be honest about that because these stories always seem to resolve in one dramatic scene, and the reality is paperwork and waiting and more paperwork. It took 8 months from the initial filing. What happened? My parents were required to repay the funds. The full amount, including interest. The account my mother had opened in my name was closed. There were criminal referrals. I chose not to push the criminal prosecution to its fullest extent. Not out of mercy exactly, but out of self-preservation. A criminal trial would have cost me more than it returned to me, emotionally and financially. My attorney negotiated a civil settlement. I got the money. The money came in 2 parts, one payment up front, one structured over 18 months. I have received both. I paid off my car. I funded an emergency savings account, the real kind, the kind where 3 months of expenses sit untouched. I started a retirement account. I'm going back to school for my RN. The applications are in. Sylvia crying, I told her. Not sad crying. The other kind. My parents and I don't speak anymore. Not in a dramatic, final announcement way. It just gradually became clear that there was nothing left to say that either of us wanted to hear. My mother has never apologized. My father sent one email that was mostly an explanation of their intentions and contained the phrase, "We always meant for you to have it eventually," which I read once and then moved to a folder I don't open. Kevin and I text sometimes. More than before, actually. There's something about having a reckoning that shifts the furniture around in a relationship. Things that were in the way get moved. And sometimes what's underneath is worth something. Aunt Sylvia comes to Columbus twice a year now. We go to dinner at a place with tablecloths, and she insists on paying, and I let her because I have learned that love sometimes needs somewhere to go, and the best you can do is not block it. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. For 6 years, I told myself the story that I just wasn't good enough at making things work, that everyone else had something figured out that I was missing, that there was a version of my life that was going well somewhere, and I just needed to find my way to it. I was right about that last part. There was a version of my life where I had a cushion, where I could have made different choices about where I lived, about how I structured my time, about what I let myself want. That version existed. It had been funded. It just hadn't been delivered. The money wasn't the point in the end. I know that sounds strange coming at the end of a story that's mostly about $40,000, but the money was just the evidence. The thing it proved was simpler. Someone believed in my future enough to invest in it, quietly, for 6 years, and I didn't know. And the people who should have been on my side were building something else entirely with what they'd been given. I'm not the same person I was at the engagement party, standing in the hallway holding my phone, doing math that didn't add up. I'm still tired sometimes. I still eat rice and beans, but I'm studying for a degree that will change my earning ceiling. I have savings. I have a car that starts. And I have an aunt who I talk to every week now, not just on holidays, and who sometimes sends me articles about nursing programs, and sometimes sends me memes about cardiac patients who refuse to follow discharge instructions, and who I call when something goes wrong because she's the kind of person who picks up on the first ring. That's something. That's actually quite a lot. I'm building something now. I know where the foundation is, and I know exactly who helped me pour it. I used to think the hardest part of struggling was the struggle itself. The double shifts. The car that made a noise I couldn't afford to diagnose. The way I do mental math in the grocery store and put things back. I thought that was the weight I was carrying. I was wrong. The hardest part was not knowing why. Why I was doing everything right and still couldn't get ahead. Why it felt like I was running on a treadmill someone else had set the speed on. That kind of confusion does something to you over time. It makes you doubt your own judgment, your own effort, your own worth. I spent 6 years quietly wondering what I was missing. Turns out I wasn't missing anything. Something was just being taken. When Sylvie's told me at that party, the first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was the specific grief of wasted time. 6 years of believing a story about myself that wasn't true. 6 years of, I'm just not good enough at this yet, when the real sentence was, someone is redirecting the support that was meant for you. Those are very different sentences. They lead to very different lives. What I've come to understand is that the people who hurt us most are rarely cartoon villains. My mother didn't open that account because she was evil. She opened it because she'd decided, somewhere along the way, that she knew better. Better than Sylvia, better than me, better than the simple fact that money sent to a person belongs to that person. She substituted her judgment for my autonomy and called it protection. That's how a lot of damage gets done in families. Not with malice, with certainty. The thing about actions, though, is that they accumulate. Every month for 6 years, a choice was made, and choices that get made over and over eventually become a structure, a whole architecture of consequence that you have to either live inside or dismantle. My mother built something she thought was invisible. It wasn't. It just took the right moment, the right person saying the right words at a party, for the whole thing to become visible at once. I think about Sylvia a lot. About what it means that she sent that money faithfully for 6 years to someone she loved, with no acknowledgement, no thank you calls, no sign that it was making any difference, and she kept sending it anyway. That's a particular kind of integrity. She didn't need to see the result to keep doing the right thing. I want to be more like that, not in the sense of sending money, but in the sense of continuing to act with integrity even when you can't see the effect, even when nobody is watching, especially then. The other thing I keep coming back to is Kevin. Kevin who didn't ask questions because he never had to. That's not cruelty. That's what happens when someone is never required to reckon with where things come from. The people who never have to ask, how is this possible, are often the ones who inadvertently benefit from someone else's loss. I don't blame him. But I also think about what kind of person I want to be. And I want to be someone who asks, who notices, who doesn't just accept comfort that arrives without explanation. I'm rebuilding, slowly, with good materials this time. Savings that are actually mine. A degree I'm actually working toward. A relationship with my aunt that is one of the realest things in my life. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. The truth has a way of surfacing. Not because the universe is fair, but because deception requires constant maintenance and the people who keep secrets are not always that careful. Sylvia's banking app, a party, a hallway. That's all it took. 6 years of careful concealment, and it came apart in about 45 seconds. I don't know what the right word is for what I feel now. It's not forgiveness and it's not bitterness. It's more like clarity. I know what happened. I know who I am. I know who showed up for me and who didn't. That knowledge is solid in a way that very few things are, and I find I can build on it. That's enough to start with. That's more than enough.